Hello everyone and welcome to my review for Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 166. We got a very good chapter this week. I'm pretty satisfied with getting this before we go on break next week. Basically wrapped up the fight between Yuji and Higuruma, so we're not stuck waiting for this to get its conclusion for 2 weeks. I'm assuming when we come back we're going to be going over to whatever's going on with Megumi, so that should be interesting. But personally, I found this to be the more interesting of the two situations, so, I'm not, I'm interested, but I'm not, super excited for it like I was for this stuff. So, I would say the two most important things to talk about in this chapter center around Higuruma's power and Higuruma's character. You'll notice lately we've been talking a lot about Higuruma. Well, he's one of the characters being focused on the most, but there's so much to talk about with Higuruma. I've said it before, other people have said it, it will be said many times. Higuruma is absolutely incredible when you consider how much content and development has been put into a character that has appeared in only, half a dozen chapters? It's just outstanding. So, for starters, we find out what exactly the death sentence is. What is Judgment's death sentence? Well, apparently, Higuruma's gavel turns into the Executioner's sword. And if you're hit with the Executioner's sword, you just die. I assume your brain functions just stop and you cease to live. Sukuna could probably revive Yuji from that. Now, first off, this ability on its own is pretty broken. There are only a few characters it doesn't beat, those being ones that are just so much faster than Higuruma, or just so maneuverable that they can avoid his attacks, or Gojo, because Gojo can't be hit with the sword, so he would survive it. However, death sentence on its own is not the highest punishment that Judgment can dish out. The most severe punishment that Judgment can give is death sentence and confiscation, meaning that Higuruma has the Executioner's sword, and his target is not able to use their curse technique, or in Yuji's case, can't use cursed energy. Now this changes up the game quite a bit. Because if, Gojo is not able to use his curse technique anymore, then it's theoretically plausible that Higuruma could hit and kill Gojo. Now, of course, this is all the result of Higuruma's domain expansion, and Higuruma is probably the, not the weakest, maybe the second weakest character we've seen with the domain expansion. Only above Megumi, but who knows how much stronger his domain has gotten since. It was only an incomplete domain thus far. So, if he fought against most of the other characters we've seen with domains, they could just activate their own and break out of his domain. So, it's very interesting. It's broken if the right conditions are met, which I enjoy. And that's what I had always figured we would be getting at this part of the story. It kind of seemed like we were getting that post-Shibuya, that we wouldn't have so many characters that are just straight up really strong, like the Disaster Spirits, and we'd be getting more characters who are strong in that their technique is complicated. Their powers are strange, and because they're so strange, they're really hard to beat. Or they're just really useful. And Higuruma, so far, is probably the best example we've had of that. His forced suicide punishment is theoretically not that strong. But if various conditions are met, he will kill you. He will straight up kill a lot of characters. And that's pretty cool. I'm a big fan of that. Now, the other thing we have to talk about is Higuruma's character, which we already know is great. But we get even more stuff for his character this chapter. And this actually ties into kind of a secondary aspect of his domain expansion. So why was Higuruma so shocked at the end of last chapter? That's because he's already aware of what the evidence is as soon as it's given, which kind of sounds like cheating until you consider the fact that Higuruma is a prosecutor. And the prosecution always has all the evidence before you go to court. So, makes sense that he would have that. And the evidence showed that Yuji contains Sukuna within him. And Sukuna took over his body and was the one responsible for the massacre in Shibuya. And Higuruma can't understand why Yuji would take responsibility for this. Why he would admit to these killings, this mass murder, if he's not the one who actually did it. And we get some flashbacks of Higuruma's days back in law school that also provide fairly interesting insight into his character. One of his professors asked him why he doesn't consider becoming a judge, and his answer was basically like, I'm not really interested in that. I want to help people. I want to be someone that helps ensure that innocent people don't go to jail. I'm not interested in promotions or any of that shit. I just want to help people out. Which is very noble of him. However, something Higuruma's always thought about is the fact that people in general are very flawed and ugly. Everyone is. The victims and the victimizers. They're all flawed and hideous in their own ways. And after becoming so jaded from his experiences, his breaking point that we saw where he finally gained his curse technique, these things are not good. He doesn't like these aspects of people. All people are flawed, regardless of how good they try to be. However, Higuruma's original opinion on this, and the one that he comes back to during this chapter, is that, yeah, humans are flawed, humans generally kind of suck, but that is a very unique, precious characteristic of humanity. And that's something that we should cherish. And, I mean, what can I say? That's always one of the best things you can have a character believe. It's just wonderful. It's fantastic. So, Higuruma knows Yuji's innocent. He knows that Yuji is not the one responsible for the mass murder in Shibuya. So at the last moment, when he had Yuji dead to rights, he could have killed Yuji. He deactivates his technique, takes a big fucking punch from Yuji. I guess that's kind of a durability feat on Higuruma's part for taking that. Fight's over. Higuruma's asking him, why would you take the blame for this? You didn't do it. You're innocent. You had no control over your own body. You had no input on the situation. Legally, you have no responsibility for what Sukuna did. So why did you take the blame for it? And Yuji's answer is it's because he's weak. He was so weak that he had to eat Sukuna's finger in the first place. He was so weak that he couldn't stop himself from being beaten by Chozo, which then allowed himself to be force-fed Sukuna's fingers. And he wasn't strong enough to stop Sukuna from taking over his body. So in his mind, because he's weak, those people died, and as a result, it's his fault. And Higuruma kind of understands this, but he doesn't agree, clearly. So we're getting good interactions between the two. This is great. And then the end of the chapter, Higuruma asks Yuji if he actually has killed someone, like of his own volition before. And he says that he has. And we know there are a few examples of those. His killing of Mahito's transfigured humans, and when he killed Esso. Those are times that he killed humans, or, people. And that was of his own volition. That was him doing it, 100%. And Higuruma sympathizes with how Yuji probably feels over that, because we know Yuji does feel bad for that. He has never, ever relished in killing a person. Higuruma understands that that must have been the worst, because he's experienced it himself. After he gained his curse technique in the courtroom, he killed 2 of the people in there. Something that I saw brought up in the comments on my reaction from this week is that Higuruma had 102 points, meaning he had to have killed at least 20 sorcerers and 2 normal people. And it seems those 2 normal people were probably the judge and the prosecutor in that case, because those were probably the ones he was the most pissed off at. But unlike the sorcerers who attacked him and he was fighting back in self-defense, Higuruma straight up murdered those people. He killed them in cold blood because he hated them. And while initially he said it feels a lot better than you'd think, turns out that was kind of cope. That was a little bit of cope right there. He feels really terrible about that. Because there was no justice in that. Higuruma is someone who has always been in favor of justice, of doing what's right, and ensuring that people get their fair trial in court, that they are found innocent when they're innocent. He doesn't believe in, like, punishing people for stuff that they didn't do, or doing excessive punishments, like murdering people for being part of a corrupt system. And that's why he feels bad for it. Is because it was unwarranted. As much as he may have hated those dudes, there was nothing that justified him killing them. Because, I mean, killing a judge and a prosecutor is not going to change Japan's legal system. That's not how that works. And probably after the fact, after the heat of the moment, Higuruma was probably like, whoa, oh my god, what the fuck have I done? So, just a whole nother layer of depth to Higuruma. And I'm very excited to see how he's going to play into things in the future, because he has agreed to give Yuji his 100 points to make a new rule. So, I'm hoping that Higuruma is going to be joining the squad from here on out, that he's going to be teaming up with Yuji. They're going to be going through the culling game together. When we regroup, Higuruma is going to be part of the big squad. Because he's great. He's wonderful. I mean, why would you squander Higuruma? I can accept various explanations for him going off into other places, but come on, Gege. You just keep Higuruma here. Please. I'll pay you. I'll pay you the money I get from my patrons. Speaking of, special thanks to Fuse, Neo, Dijon Redden, Anthony Chavez, Honey Mustard, Zach Rowitz, K-God, Chris Redfield, Scratch23, Rat, Ryzen 4K, Artist, Mac Campaign, Wave of Manga, Chuck's Feed and Seed, and Jakester EZ. Thank you all very much for supporting me on Patreon. I greatly appreciate it. And if you too want to get a shout out at some point during videos, or access to reviews for solo leveling in the Boxer, you can always become a patron as well. There's a link to my Patreon down in the description. I think there are many great arguments for keeping Higuruma around for, like, character and narrative purposes. Yuji has his defense attorney. He has someone who will defend him to the death in a court of law. Yuji literally could not ask for a better defense attorney in all of fucking Japan. That's the man that he needs by his side when he is on trial by the Jujutsu world for a crime he really is not responsible for, even if he does take some of the blame for it. And the other reason is that Higuruma is another character that, as we can tell sort of from the end of this chapter, is very clearly someone that can help Yuji develop further. Help Yuji develop from his trauma in Shibuya. Yuji has grown, but, like, negatively. He's negatively developed from Shibuya, and I think Higuruma is one of a few characters, including, like, Hakari and probably Todo, whenever he shows back up, who can help really turn things around for him. So we're just gonna have to see what happens with him. Once again, I'm assuming when we get back from break, we're gonna be focusing on Megumi, whatever the fuck's going on with him, assuming Remy and Reggie haven't been off-screened like losers to showcase how bloodthirsty Megumi is. Well, not bloodthirsty, cold-blooded. How cold-blooded Megumi is. I wouldn't really have much of an issue with that, to be totally honest. I'm generally not a favor of off-screening people, but if it's to kind of make a point, especially when the characters are, like, just introduced, they're not super hyped up, they're clearly, like, kind of scrubs. Yeah, fuck it, off-screen them, whatever. Maybe kind of adds to the brutality of it or something. But I'm figuring that'll be what we go to next, and then after that it'll be Hikari time. Which means at some point in the next few months we're gonna actually see what Hikari's curse technique is, fucking finally. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for this week's review. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you don't miss any of my uploads. If you haven't already, definitely subscribe and help us reach our subscriber goal of hitting 4,000 by the end of the year. It'd be a big help. If you enjoy discussing Jujutsu Kaisen with other people, or you just enjoy the content I produce in this channel, I highly suggest you check out my Discord server. I have a link to that down in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys around. Take care.